We are a team. As storytellers and dreamers,
there is always magic to discover.
Once upon a time,
a Las Vegas showgirl
and a comedian magician
figured out that even with different perspectives,
our adventures and experiences together
are really just
one big
caper.
Hey there, welcome back to One Big Caper. I'm Athena, this is my partner Phelyx, and we have a very special episode today talking about our favorite holiday of all time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our favorite holiday. You can probably easily tell which that is, and by the timing of the release of this episode.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
a little bit. We're jumping the game just a little, but it's what we do.
It's all right.
I forgot. I need notes. I have my notes here.
Oh, we're getting serious.
Yeah, I did some research.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Are you sure?
We've determined that we believe we have enough to say that we might be doing this in two parts.
Yeah, this is part one.
Yep.
Yeah, this is part one. So I wanted to talk about our favorite holiday is Halloween, and it's in this household, it's sacred. It's sacred time.
Yeah.
And it's not just the night Halloween. It is about 2 months leading up to.
Yeah, gosh, I guess that makes us like a craft store or a box store. We start putting out the Halloween a little early.
I saw my first Halloween chocolate pumpkins at the grocery store on July 31st. I don't understand it. I really don't. But it's a commercial holiday, obviously. And I kind of wanted, I wanted to talk about kind of the history of Halloween.
Sure.
Can we do that?
Sure.
Do you know where Halloween comes from?
I believe I do, but go ahead. You're the one who did some homework.
I spent like an hour kind of just seeing what the Google said.
Okay, we're laying out Halloween and where it came from.
Okay, so Halloween came from a Celtic end of summer festival called Samhain. And it's spelled Saimhim or something like that. Yeah. So, yeah. It's not spelled the way it's spoken, but it's Celtic, right? Mm-hmm. And what the Celtics believed was that the veil on October 31st was thinner between the natural, the human world and the spiritual, supernatural world. And they believed that the spirits could come and visit. So part of the celebration of the end of summer and the harvest was dressing up in costumes, generally like animal heads and skins, so they could trick the spirits that were there for no good, that were up to no good, basically. So that was kind of how it started, the dress up aspect, which is kind of my favorite part of the whole holiday anyway. Right. So yeah, I just wanted to, bring that piece in there. I have the links that we'll put in the show notes to all of these statistics and facts I bring up. But so, of course, with colonialization and all the things that happen in the world, and Christianity trying to do what they do and put a damper on different cultures, religions and spiritual ceremonies and things, they came in and started messing with it and making it a All Saints Day was November 1st, and that was by one of the popes in like the Middle Ages or something. And so they basically tried to kind of like dampen it and remove kind of the witchy aspect of
it. Was pagan, right?
Yeah.
So that's a no-no.
Yeah, exactly. In the modernized, what do they call it? Civilized world. Yeah.
But interestingly, so was Christmas and Easter. Paganism.
Yeah. So they took some of these old celebrations, these ancestral celebrations, and they kind of like, they put a blanket over it with their religion. And so you have these
commandeered the celebrations,
culturally appropriated. And then they got rid of what they didn't want, and they kept what they liked, which was the gift giving, the celebration of the harvest, and things like that. So that's a little bit about the history. I wanted to talk about the costumes, because that's our favorite part, I think. And I think there's that's my favorite part.
I'll explain why I made the expression. If you're just listening to this, I gave a I disagree look, I suppose.
Okay.
We love costumes, and we're good at it. And it is a big, we always make our own, and it is a big thing in this home. The whole family is into that, but we don't reserve it for Halloween.
Right. And for the past few years, we haven't actually dressed up on Halloween.
I haven't in a very long time, because I dress up all year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. This is kind of was the inspiration for this episode, was just to talk about how Halloween, dressing up and dressing in costume, was only reserved traditionally for the Halloween. So you could only dress up for Halloween, and that was it.
Yeah, that was the only time that it was appropriate. It was totally inappropriate to wear a cape any other day of the year.
Yeah. But now it's becoming more of a thing. There's a huge popularity in costume or themed parties at different times of the year. People are even doing like Flapper Gatsby inspired weddings and things like that. And even I when I was a rideshare driver, I gave a ride to an artist who, him and his partner, wanted to do a white wedding and do the chalk. But the chalk was a surprise to the guests.
Oh, geez, you should tell people.
Yeah, I don't. But they're artists, so maybe they didn't. Or maybe the artist's friends would, be fine with destroying their white suit that they bought specifically for a white wedding. Or
I think I'd be a little upset.
I know, we talked about that after that ride, but that was the idea. So they wanted to, and so it's a different kind of, it's a theme. But that's what inspired this, was that I've noticed that there's, the rise of cosplay, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry by now, cosplay.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's not even for Halloween, but people are making these extravagant costumes,
elaborate
based
and detailed
extravagant to me is that elaborate and detailed, based on their favorite superheroes or fandom characters. And so I just thought it'd be fun to talk about, why do we do this? Why is the dressing up part so exciting for us? And
there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of psychology there, for sure. Yeah,
and that's why I brought this up, because I guess I can just like throw in the bits of facts I found, the stats and things. But the first article I found was about the psychology of dressing up, and I'm like, bingo, that's it. So, do you want me to keep going? I feel like I have my paper.
You have your list?
Okay. So one of the articles I read was published in October 2018. So before a lot of the world events that changed a lot of people and kind of how we behave. But they were saying that just dressing up is playing with identity. So that's why it's fascinating to me, is psychologically, people are playing with identity, and it has been a theme for Americans specifically, that it is a part of playing with identity. Not any other country, maybe some, but mostly Americans love the idea of playing with identity. And that's why I think the cosplay and all these things have like blown up in this country, because I think we as a culture, if you can call us a culture, if we have a culture as Americans, that we don't really know who we are a lot of the time. And so dressing up is a way for us to play with some of the things that are moving around in our heads as to who we are or want to be.
Hmm.
And I talk about the alter ego all the time. Gazella was my alter ego. Gazella was the energy I embodied to get up on a stage and do burlesque, And so I don't even own half the dresses that I used to own as Gazella because I don't wear them anymore. And it's just like, now you call my superhero costume what I used to wear when I was doing the gig work.
Mm-hmm.
And I would wear a certain outfit. And that was like, helped me with the identity of being of service in that manner. So, one thing I saw in this one article was that the ages 18 to 34 were the highest participants in dressing up and participating in Halloween. So like,
and it used to be only children, and now it's
yes. Right. Well, I mean, historically, it started off as adults. Adults would be dressing, when we're talking about Samhain, and they were dressing up to protect the family and, with their superstitions or beliefs. That's, but then over time here in America, it wasn't a big thing until the mid 1900s when there was an influx of Irish immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when America really started celebrating Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting? I think it's very interesting.
We played with the idea that jack-o'-lanterns started as turnips.
Oh yeah, that was an interesting.
It was an experiment here at home with the family, and
I liked it. I mean, I thought they were much easier to carve than pumpkins.
Turnips.
Yeah. So if you haven't ever tried that for a Halloween, like we just read that was the original jack-o'-lantern, and they came out really cute, and they're small and they're funny, funny looking.
Yeah.
But it's like better than carving up this massive thing and leaving it on your doorstep to rot until Thanksgiving. Trust me, I saw this happen in 2020 and a little bit 2021 when I was doing grocery delivery. So people would literally let their pumpkins rot on the porches, which
I believe it.
Yeah, so maybe they were trying to feed the squirrels, but I don't think squirrels like rotten food.
I've seen squirrels get drunk
on
fermented fruit.
Oh. Well,
strange little aside there.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about the psychology of it because the ages 18 to 34 are pretty much millennials. This was again 2018, so that was 4 years ago. So that would make them 22 to 37, 38 right now. That's the millennials that are doing the things. They're really engaging in Halloween.
Yeah, all of the psychology that we're aware of and that we've ever talked about when it comes to dressing up, I think, whether it's escapism or playing with identity or I brought up even, as we were briefly discussing what we were going to talk about today, I brought up the kink side of things.
That
and the old masquerade balls and hiding your identity.
Yeah, because in the 30s that was what was popular. During the Depression, rather, people would be concealing their identities and they'd be dressing up as cats and witches and devils, and they would have a mask on and go to these adult parties. So, yeah, the concealing, that was an interesting perspective that I didn't even research or think about because I brought him my research and then he said, well, what about the kink factor? And I was like, oh, well, then there's that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
that has a relationship with furries. The furries
right.
are the new masquerade ball, I guess.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
But we have to acknowledge, we have the responsibility to acknowledge that there are different kinds of furries. So there's not just one group and they're not all into the kink. Yeah. I
don't know what he's talking about. Do we need to do an episode on furries?
No, it's really all I know.
Okay.
But, yeah. I've been made aware that there are different kinds of.
It's not always a sexual kink thing. Okay.
Or there's different, there's a
spectrum.
Yes.
Like everything else, there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Yes, we're learning. There's a spectrum. Halloween is the second largest commercial holiday after Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I believe it.
When I read this article, I think it was 2019, and they say we're spending $6 billion annually on Halloween. And I was like, okay, compared to like 680 billion for Christmas.
Is it really that much?
It's that much.
Weird.
See,
I'm not a huge fan of Christmas.
No, this is the Grinch right here.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to bring up about that was that I looked up the expectations for 2021. I couldn't find the expectations for 2022 for spending, but people that they surveyed were planning to spend on average $102.74 on Halloween per person. So that means if a family of 4 like ourselves, we would be spending $400 just on Halloween. And that's pretty close to accurate because I usually spend about $50 to $75 on candy between September, that day after Labor Day, all the way through Halloween.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we always add a little bit to our decorations. Mm-hmm. And there's always, the girls like to get new costumes. So last year, I think their costumes were $100 each.
Okay. Because
they wanted to do Among Us.
Mm-hmm.
And that was absurd. $100 on a colored pantsuit and a red helmet. Or purple, whatever. I think they were red and purple.
Yeah.
$100. So that's what's upsetting about the whole industry is that they're capitalizing on people's desires to play with identity and conceal their identities.
They just saw an opportunity.
And toxic capitalism.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess if you can say that. But yeah, in 2019, the average per person was $86.27. It's a huge jump. And in 2020, the year we were not supposed to go out anywhere, people spent $8.05 billion. That's up from $6 billion in 2019.
There was, I remember that year.
That is,
and I do I make a lot of trips to Home Depot, and Home Depot seized that opportunity because people, because they were staying home, spent a lot more money on decorating their homes.
When I was doing the grocery shopping, the stores I would frequent were Target and King Soopers. And on most people's lists towards like the last week or two were the Halloween items, not just candy, but decorations too. So it was really interesting to see, like, what are people decorating for? Why are they spending all this money?
Because they didn't go out.
But they couldn't go out, right? So it was interesting to observe that happening.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's get back to costumes. Sorry, I wanted to talk about the spending because we spend a lot on our costumes. We spend more than $100 on our costumes.
I think we count as professional in terms of
professional.
There are hobbyists, there are novices, and then there are.
Well, do cosplayers? Do some cosplayers count as professionals then?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm aware of many cosplayers who make a full-time living.
Yeah, being one of them. Yeah, incredible. Like seamstress, and she works with so many different materials, and now she has her own line at Joann's.
A guilty little pleasure of mine is to watch some of these people and their content of creating these costumes and the techniques that they use and the materials that they use. I consume that information quite a bit.
It's interesting that's a thing, and they can get paid money for doing that. Like
some of them are doing very well, but they're amazing. One in particular who I follow, not actively, but I passively just kind of consume. A person in Germany who has even shown how she's developed as an artist and a creator. So
is this the one that made that book?
I think she's published several books at this point.
No.
No. That's a different artist. But she's actually shown photographs of the progression of her skill set.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
Holy moly! I mean, the creations now are just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she doesn't do commissions anymore.
Absolutely.
Because-
will not do a
Because
commission.
people don't understand. And I like, even the man I learned how to do feathers and make showgirl costumes from, he said that people come to him almost every year asking for him to make a showgirl costume
for Halloween
for $150.
Oh my god!
That wouldn't even buy the amount of feathers you would make.
I think
even.
somewhere else I published that if you wanted to get into a authentic showgirl costume, $3,000 is the base starting point.
Yeah. Unless you can find a costume that was already made for those ambient showgirl productions. Some of them are legit. They used to be showgirls, and some of them are just like, we're just going to put a bunch of ostrich plumes on a hat and pass them off as showgirls.
That's another episode.
That's a whole other.
We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't dress up for Halloween.
No, not specifically for Halloween. No.
So why do we dress up?
I do it because I enjoy it.
Okay.
But I always have. It has been we've brought this up in a previous episode. But it has been a theme to my life and my career.
Yeah. Well, me too. I mean, my dad owned a costume shop when I was growing up. One of the only ones in Denver. And I don't know, maybe 10 years he ran that. It started off as like a small store next to the dance studio. And then it grew into its own space, massive space. And then he sold it to this other woman who became one of the Denver players for a while. And then she moved off to Dubai and sold it to the next person in line. So, I mean, he sold not just the box costumes that you can just buy off the rack, but he also sold the rental costumes, which that was a creation for my dad. I watched these things happen. And I think that his love, my parents, they didn't dress up a lot. A few years we did do family themed things. There was one year when my brother was alive, because he was born with a heart defect, so he was the Tin Man.
Okay.
And so my mom was the Wicked Witch. I don't know why my dad was Beetlejuice. I was a cheerleader, and I don't remember what the other two kids were at the time. But we tried to do that theme kind of thing. But that was before. I think that's when my dad was like, "Oh, why don't we do costumes?" I think that was the year when he started the shop. But I got my pick of costumes every year. He'd have the Ruby's catalog, and I would be like, I want to be that for this year. But this is a juicy bit. My mom used to make my costumes when I was young, before the dance studio, when she used to have time.
Mm-hmm.
And I do show this picture of me as Wonder Woman, the Linda Carter version, with the little blue bikini and the red corset vest, and standing there with my little moon boots. This is 1980, whatever, 5. I have that picture. I show it in my top 10 favorite costumes of all time, because it was one of my favorite costumes. But I really started to appreciate homemade or costumes over the store-bought, like really early on, like way early on.
Me too.
Did you know that store-bought costumes back in the 20s and 30s were considered a luxury item?
I know that I would have put it a little different, but yeah, I know that homemade costumes were what poor people did.
Most people. Yeah. I mean, that was the time of the Depression too.
I think that's just silly, and I'm glad that, as far as I'm aware, that the perception has changed.
Shifted,
and
yeah.
we have a reverence for handcrafted costume.
All of
my mom also made costumes for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have a couple of elements. Like a devil's tail. The little aeroplane.
I think you showed me that, and I was like, that's adorable. Which brings me to the list of costumes. So I was on the History Channel website, and they have this whole article, which I'll link, and they have a little gallery of costumes by decade. And I found it fascinating that in the 20s, that's when it started to shift more towards children.
Mhm.
The reason they started shifting Halloween towards children was because there was vandalism and like really not good stuff happening because adults were getting crazy and drunk and
Yeah.
doing drugs and causing chaos.
Right.
So they started shifting to in the 20s to 50s. They started shifting it more to a community event. It's like the
It was a
celebration
neighborhood thing,
back
and-
to
yeah.
celebration of the harvest and this is how we do it. So that's in America, at least that's how it started to progress. But in the 20s, the costumes were spooky themed. They were
Mhm.
black cats and witches and devils and
Ghosts,
angels and
yeah.
ghosts, and everyone was something spooky.
Mhm.
And like I said, the box costumes were a luxury because the country was going through what it was going through financially. But in the 50s or the 30s, it was to conceal identity, which kind of makes sense because maybe people were embarrassed by being in the Depression and what people had to do to make a living in the Depression and things like that. Yeah. But in the 50s to 70s, the box costumes became more popular because people could afford them. They were more affordable. They were mass produced, so they were more affordable. And there was this like plastic sheets with the plastic masks.
Horrible plastic masks. I had a few of those.
Ugh. I don't get it. I still don't get it, but it's probably because the handcrafted was introduced to me so young, and that I had an appreciation for handcrafted, and I could tell my mom, this is what I want to be.
We loved as kids. We loved makeup instead of masks. We liked to have the paint on our face,
Which that came in the 70s.
Right.
Yes, and in
So
the
did I.
70s, you're right, and I was way after there, but
No, you were.
almost the 80s, my friend. Okay,
Mhm.
so I thought it was interesting that in the 70s, so prior to the 50s, it was the spooky costumes. But then in the 50s and 50s, 60s, 70s, they started becoming current event type of
Right.
costumes. Like people would dress up as Sputnik or
Right.
a Russian general or President Nixon.
Mhm.
That's when the politician mask became popular, was when Nixon was in office.
Mhm.
Weirdly. And they said in the 70s, sexy costumes became a thing. So people were dressing up as Playboy bunnies.
Yeah,
And
in
going
the
out
era
and-
of disco, I can totally picture that.
Right, and they had it. It's funny you say that because the picture was from Studio 54.
Mhm.
So then came the 80s, and there were slasher movies and horror movies,
Mhm.
and people started dressing up in these characters, Mike Myers and Jason, and who am I forgetting? Freddy Krueger.
Sure.
Right. And so then we have all of these mixes of all of these decades where people are doing, either political statements or their characters from movies. That's also the late 70s brought Star Wars. People were dressing up as the Star Wars characters.
Sure.
And so I think that with all of these things, Halloween costumes were always inspired or influenced by what was happening in our society at the time. So, which is really interesting. In the 90s came the sexy costumes, the sexy nurse. Like it became a whole
The sexy
line.
firefighter, the sexy everything. Oh, yeah,
Everything
yeah.
was sexy, and it was a short skirt with a really tight top and a hat of some sort, like the cop hat or whatever.
You've seen it. They know
You
what
know
we're talking
exactly.
about. They know,
and
they've
you
seen
wear
it.
the thigh highs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to take everyone through that timeline of costumes.
Why not? So as predicted, we are going to cut this and then give you another episode, and we'll record it right now, of course. But
We didn't do
we're
a
excited
juicy
to-
bit.
Oh well, do you have one? A quick one, or
A quick one? Do you have one?
I do, but it's not a quick one necessarily. But
Okay, that's okay.
yeah, sure, why not?
Okay.
I elected for this episode, I elected to wear the lab coat that I've talked about on previous episodes. This is something that I use in my shows, and I use it to illustrate some of my one of my many experiments with costume. And I was to deliver a TED Talk on the subject, and they thought better of it because they didn't want me to inspire somebody out there to do something unlawful or stupid. I have experimented with costume my whole life. I've mentioned it several times, even on this show. And one of the things I haven't yet mentioned was also something that caused Athena to heckle me at a show early in our relationship. So I was describing to my audience during that show one of the techniques that I used to deliver court documents as a process server. When I worked as a private investigator in the early 1990s, one of my jobs was to do process serving, and very often people don't want to receive those documents, and if they don't receive them, then the court can't enforce a court date. So I had to verify someone's identity and then hand them documents and tell them, once I knew they were who I was supposed to hand the documents to, I had to tell them they had been served, and then I have to sign off that I witnessed this and actually made this happen. Nevertheless, a lot of people won't answer their door, understandably. They will answer their door for a couple of things. One, I learned they'll answer a door for a pizza. Even if they didn't order a pizza, if they look through the people and see somebody standing there with a pizza, they'll open the door. I also went to a thrift store and I bought a short sleeve brown button-up shirt and short pants that were also brown, and I would carry a box because people will always open the door for a package. And I would knock on the door, they'd look through the peephole, see me in a brown outfit holding a box, and they would open the door. And then I would flip the box over, the paperwork's taped to the bottom, and I would hand them the box. And it caused Athena, when I told that story at a show, caused Athena to shout an expletive and heckle me, which was kind of funny, actually.
We have it on camera, actually. Yeah.
We do.
You don't use that story in your show anymore since that show.
I haven't.
Sorry.
You didn't ruin it.
Really?
Yeah. The lab coat tells the same story in a more entertaining way, I believe.
Okay.
A similar story or concept or whatever. I think it's more entertaining.
Okay.
To try to picture me after they've seen me on stage all stiff and proper, to try to picture imagine me running through a hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's more entertaining.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I thought it was my fault that he stopped telling that story.
It is with that, I will remind you, you can reach us any old time at hello@onebigcaper.com. And we want to hear your thoughts. Give us prompts to talk about. And thank you for listening. We'll see you in part 2.
We can't keep doing this without you. Give us just a little bit of your time by subscribing, sharing, rating, or talking about One Big Caper with someone else. We truly appreciate your support.
We want to hear your stories. Visit onebigcaper.com to get to know us even more.
This episode of One Big Caper was published in 2022. All rights to broadcast in whole or in part are the property of Gazellus Productions, LLC.